Dragon's Gold by Kelsey McIntyre. Read by Albert Saenz. The Goblin King liked the yellowish light that reflected from polished gold. He thought it improved his complexion. When he was surrounded by gold, his subjects could no longer snigger to each other that their king was the color of the grass inside a cow's stomach. No, golden light gave him a more dignified shade, reminiscent of, perhaps, boiled seaweed, a richer hue altogether, especially considering the value of the gold itself. The king had developed this opinion after studying his skin and daydreaming for 2 hours in his bathtub one evening. Wiggling his toes lazily in the tepid water, he had held his scrawny arm up to the faucet and imagined what the effect would have been if the faucet were made of gold instead of pewter. By the time he retired to his clammy bedchamber in the heart of his underground palace, he was convinced he needed gold, a pile of it, in all shapes and textures. Gold coins, gold cups, gold combs, gold crowns. Yes, at the very least, a gold crown so that he could wear it on his throne and look seaweedy in front of his attendants. According to the guard stationed for the first watch outside the king's door, his majesty had been giggling in his sleep. So it was that 10 goblin hunters gathered at the foot of a jagged mountain the next evening with orders to find a dragon's lair, raid it, and return laden with golden treasures for their king. Grimoss, as usual, led the expedition. His quip about Laith, after the failure of his last mission, had greatly displeased the king. But then again, no other goblin had as much experience on the hunt as Grimoss did. He had made sure to shriek that out several times as he was being dragged down to the dungeon. And finally, after the king and his attendants had laughed at his lisp until their stomachs cramped, they agreed to reinstate him. "Stay low," Grimoss breathed to his team, slinking between two boulders near the mountain's base. Mudge, who considered himself second in command despite his blunder on the children hunting episode, wedged through to join the chief.
"How are we supposed to find this dragon's lair?"
"Smoke," Grimoss muttered, slitted eyes already scanning the mountain top.
"Ah, smoke."
Mudge's face was blunt and inscrutable, as if it had been sculpted out of muddy gravel, but one of the goblins in the back tittered. "Smoke against the sky," Grimoss snapped, "from the dragon's nostrils." The sound of the word nostrils provoked an eruption of giggles. "Like that smoke?" Nurgle, the tallest, asked, pointing toward the peak. "Or is that just a cloud?" He tried to phrase the question as intelligently as possible, but after dusk his vision was so atrocious that the hazy blot above the cliffs might have been a hot air balloon for all he could see. The 10 goblins froze, staring at the smudge in the sky. For a second it lingered, sinking toward the mountainside, and then, with a faint steaming noise, another spurt streamed from a crevice in the rocks. "Climb," Grimoss ordered. They bounded up the slope, scrambling over each other and slipping on loose pebbles. The cave was near the top of the mountain, and by the time they reached it, the moon had lifted yellow and magnified above the trees in the valley. Grimoss spread out his arms to signal the others to stop, the back of his neck glittering with sweat in the moonlight. "Now, who wants to go see what we're up against?" A heaving silence while all of them caught their breath and stared at their boss.
"I think you should go, Chief,"
Mudge grunted. Grimoss flicked his eyes at the cave entrance. It looked peaceful enough, but the charred, fruity scent of dragon smoke still infused the air. "Fine," he muttered. "Splate, come with me. We might need your brains and Nurgle to reach the highest pieces of gold." Splate, A spruce green goblin with disconcertingly neon-colored eyes slunk forward, and Nurgle tripped after him. "When I whistle, the rest of you come after us," Grimoss said, and motioned Splate and Nurgle to follow him to the cave's entrance. They approached the opening from the side, tiptoeing in patches of mud or grass to avoid dislodging any rocks. Another smoky sigh blasted from the hole, stinging their sinuses at such close range. "If asleep," Grimoss whispered. Splate nodded immediately, fluorescent eyes gleaming. Nurgle copied him, although he hadn't understood any of the chief's last comment. Asleep? What was asleep? He hoped it wasn't more dangerous than an ordinary dragon. Taking one last breath of smoke-filled air, the three darted into the cave. The very awake dragon smiled steadily at them, his claws and wings folded, and no gold in sight.
"Hello there," he said. "You sounded like a sandy avalanche making your way up here."
Grimoss, Splate, and Nurgle gaped at him, their throats clicking as they tried to form a response.
"You haven't by any chance come for my treasure?"
the dragon prompted. "You don't seem to have any treasure," Nurgle gulped, taking a step back. "So, our apologies, we must be in the wrong cave."
"I'm sitting on it," the dragon said.
Grimoss looked at Splate. He was considered to be one of the shrewdest goblins in their colony, but rarely spoke unless it was absolutely clear that his skills were needed. Grimoss stared at him, unblinking, to make it absolutely clear. Splate crossed all 5 fingers on each hand in an effort to consider their options. The tone of his address could mean the difference between getting out with gold and getting burnt alive.
"Give us a golden crown,"
he said,
"and no one will get hurt."
The dragon burst out laughing, tendrils of flame escaping him and coming close enough to warm the goblins' faces.
"Answer me a riddle, and I'll give you a golden crown."
Splate twisted his hands behind his back. After his initial attempt at domination, he thought it best not to refuse the beast's offer.
"What is the riddle?"
The last smoky traces of the dragon's mirth curled toward the ceiling, and he leveled his gaze at the hunters again.
"What did I have for dinner?"
Grimoss and Nurgle swiveled to face Splate.
"But that's not a fair riddle,"
Splate spluttered. "I am a dragon. I can make up whatever riddle I want," the dragon growled, stroking the floor with one of his claws and creating a spiral shaving of rock. Grimoss almost drooled with self-congratulation for choosing Splate to do the talking instead of going in by himself.
"What did you have for dinner?"
Splate repeated. He made a fist and pinched each of his fingertips in turn between his palm and his thumb. The echo of some sort of logical reasoning wafted around in his brain. If only he could pin it down. He pinched his fingers harder. The dragon might just be cruel, asking a riddle which no one could solve. But he might also be asking it precisely because someone could solve it, if only they thought to answer.
"Nothing,"
Splate said, releasing his hand.
"You had nothing for dinner."
"What?"
the dragon said, and lifted enough on his front legs that Nurgle and Grimoss glimpsed something glittering beneath him.
"Answered by a goblin? Nothing is correct. Although I would have accepted the word goblins as well, since that's what I intend to eat," he chuckled.
"You promised us a crown," Grimoss said, stepping forward to join Splate.
"Oh, that's right," the dragon sighed, a few sparks shooting from his mouth. "Well, unfortunately, I don't have a crown. I was just toying with you. I do have. Let's see. He wrapped his tail around himself to shield his hoard from view and rummaged around in the pile. Ah. Grimoss held out his hands eagerly. The dragon tossed something small and shiny in his direction. The best I can do is this gold-plated napkin ring. It should perch rather nicely on one of your lumpy little goblin heads. He roared with laughter again, puffing smoke and flashes of flame all around the cave. Don't mind the chipped places where the iron shows through. The three goblins stared at the napkin ring in befuddled silence. Oh, you are all much too funny, the dragon said at last, calming down. Now get out before I eat you after all. They scattered at once, skidding and stumbling over the mountainside until they reached their cronies again. Well, Mudge asked, arms folded, not looking at all impressed by the mere fact that they were alive. Do you have treasure for us to carry? Everybody hath a new assignment, Grimoss panted. As soon as we get back, convince the king that wearing table settings is the new style.
Used by We Are One Body Audio Theater, with the permission of the licensor, granted under a copyrighted license agreement. First published in Gilbert Magazine, a publication of the American Chesterton Society. A production of We Are One Body Audio Theater.